Alright, I'm going to try to make this semi-quick because my voice is totally fading out on me here. But we're going to kick this off. We're going to do some UFC 219 predictions. And I'm mixed on the card, and we'll go into detail on why I'm mixed on the card as we go on. How's that sound? So, also, say goodbye to the dragon. This will be its last video, and then we're getting a new graphic. So, rolling on, we open up with Tim Elliott versus Mark De La Rosa. De La Rosa, undefeated prospect fighter, 9-0. Not a ton of names you'd recognize. A good submission game. Kind of power-based topside. Decent boxing game. Stings people quite a bit. But he doesn't respond terribly well to pressure. Pressure in the sense of, if you just say, fuck it, I'm going in there, I'm going to get you down, I'm going to impose my will on you. And that's what Tim Elliott does. So I can't really pick him here. Tim Elliott is... He's a really good fighter. Coming off the loss to Ben Nguyen, lost 2 out of his last 3 since coming back to the UFC, but against Demetrius Johnson and Ben Nguyen, not bad. And beating Smolka in that time, who is higher up on the card for some reason, which is a bit freaking weird. I don't really understand that. Maybe, I believe this was kind of a late notice fight, so I mean, maybe that's the reason. But yeah, I'm going to go with Tim Elliott to hand. De La Rosa, his first loss via submission. I think this is an awakening to what the upper level talent is, and I'm intrigued to see how De La Rosa comes back from that. Speaking of Louis Smolka versus Matthias Nicolau. They call him Mathus on the, or at least John Anik does on the UFC telecast, but I've never heard a Brazilian with that name pronounce it that way, but it's always possible. I am going with Smolka in this one. He's coming off of 3 straight losses, admittedly to very good fighters. You could argue not so much Brandon Moreno, but Ray Borg, Tim Elliott, very good fighters. Brandon Moreno, very dangerous fighter in his own way, and Smolka kind of admitted that he took that fight a bit wrong, had the wrong idea of what Moreno was, and that explained a lot about the loss. But he's still a good scrambler, still a good grappler, not a dominant takedown artist, but one that can get the job done. Nicolau is, honestly, I feel he's just too low output to compete in the UFC's flyweight division. He's ostensibly he's really just kind of a defined counter fighter, and I'm not really sure that flyweight really has that working for him. Yeah, he's gone undefeated, but he beat John Moraga, who was not doing so great at the time, and then he got busted for PEDs. So how much of that can we really read into this? It wouldn't surprise me if he beat Smolka. Smolka has lost 3 in a row. Like I said, he's a bit of a broken man, but I think he can get the job done here. Marvin Vettori versus Omari Akhmedov. I'm going with Vettori. He's had 1 fight since he's joined King, which was the fight against Vitor Miranda, where he looked a lot better than he previously had. I expect a similar jump forward in that kind of skill and level, and I've never been a tremendous fan of Omari Akhmedov. I just don't feel he's really that. I don't feel he's UFC caliber, despite the fact that he's done reasonably well, as there's an avalanche off of my shelf for no apparent reason. But I cannot bring myself to pick him here, even though, if you had asked me, before joining Kings, if I thought Vettori had any real future, the answer probably would have been no. But he is pretty good at stuffing takedowns. His stand-up is greatly improving. His gas tank, I think, is substantially better than Akhmedov's. I think his ability to grapple is also better than Akhmedov's. Akhmedov does not have very good takedown defense in his own right. Even Vettori's takedowns are a bit subpar. I see him overwhelming him on the feet with volume, and then at some point this ending up on the ground with him getting a submission. He also has a very good guillotine, which Akhmedov, I think, could potentially run into. But Vettori by submission. Miles Jury to Rick Glenn. I'm going with Miles Jury here, even though I don't really know what to make of him. I still think that this run to featherweight is ill-advised. But Rick Glenn is a foot slow, not super athletic, very tough, very durable, skilled in all areas, but not tremendously so. Like, he beats you via durability and via pace. And I don't think he breaks Jury by decision. I think Jury, better grappler, better wrestler, probably even the better range striker, although Glenn is better in pressure situations, probably. Khalil Roundtree versus Michelle Oleksiuk. I'm going with Khalil Roundtree here. I still have concerns about him, but he is an incredibly explosive athlete. Top notch for the 205 division. Very powerful. He's putting together a striking game that's actually becoming quite respectable. Still needs to work on his takedown defense to a large degree, but Oleksiuk is incredibly hittable. Very tough, very durable, and if this fight goes late, he'll take it. But I don't think letting someone with the power and explosiveness of Roundtree unload on you like he traditionally does against almost every opponent he has is good for your long-term health. And I think that is going to result in a first-round finish here for Khalil Roundtree. Carlos Condit versus Neil Magny. If Carlos Condit loses this fight, it's a sad development. Magny is flawed in much the same way as Condit is. Not a great wrestler. Pretty decent stand-up guy. But you'd have to think Condit is the better striker of the two, the better grappler of the two. Has in more recent times really begun to become an effective wrestler. We know that Magny can be taken down relatively easily. I gotta go with Carlos Condit by decision. It wouldn't surprise me if he finished him either with strikes or with a submission. And those are definitely both on the table. But I think Magny pretty tough, and we haven't seen a submission out of Condit in a while. And I don't think he really has the killer instinct or the explosiveness. I think he's a tad gun-shy after a bad run of fights. And the Demian Maia fight does make me worry because he was talking retirement then, and he was saying things like Demian Maia actually was able to hurt him with strikes on the ground, something you would never have heard from Carlos Condit in the past. So there's reasons to be concerned, but if he loses, I think it's more of a statement on where he is than anything about Magny. Cynthia Calvillo versus Carla Esparza. Part of me thinks that Esparza is too much for Calvillo at this point. The fight with Joanne Calderwood was closer than it, probably should have in a lot of ways been, and that's concerning. That being said, Esparza, granted, 2-1 after the destruction to the hands of Jan Jacek, arguably 3-0, but that Randa Marcos fight continues to give me pause because it was a fight that I thought she would win very easily, and she did not. Whether you scored it for her or not, it was not easy. It makes me wonder how she can handle. She is a small girl for the division, 5'1", probably honestly an atom weight, not a bantam or not a straw weight. Calvillo is athletic, very strong, good wrestler in her own right. Stand-up is improving. Esparza has never been a great stand-up artist. So, I'm going to go with Calvillo, but I have some significant reservations about her. I'm kind of taking her on the basis of she might look better than she has, whereas I think Esparza is probably in that downcline shift in her career. Dan Hooker versus Mark Diakiese, and this is kind of what I was saying when I've had mixed feelings about this card. I'm actually reasonably excited for a lot of the fights here. I think Jury Glenn's going to be a good action fight. I think Roundtree Oleksiuk's going to be a good one round. I think Vettori Akhmedov is interesting. I think the flyweight bout between Smolka and Mikolau is fairly interesting. Well, I think Elliot. I'm always down for a Tim Elliott fight. Condit Magny's fun. Could be, or it could be depressing as all hell. Calvillo Esparza is reasonably interesting. So is this one, but it doesn't feel like a main card fight. And Calvillo and Esparza doesn't really either. Dan Hooker is a guy who's undergone a metamorphosis from a clinch fighter outside the UFC to more of a ranged fighter in the UFC because he's found that, frankly, he's a little too physically limited in the clinch to do what he wanted to do. And he's done a decent job of adjusting and becoming better. That being said, I still think he's a little bit short on the physical end of the spectrum. Mark Diakiese is not. Mark Diakiese is a freak. That being said, Mark Diakiese has a lot of things to learn. However, Dan Hooker also had problems with Mark Advita. He had problems with Jason Knight, who is a definitively limited striker. He had problems way back when with Maximo Blanco, and a lot of what we say about Diakiese can be said about Blanco. So I'm going to go with Mark Diakiese. His bulldog style of getting takedowns and determination and toughness. This is the thing about Diakiese that's a bit interesting, is a lot of guys who come into the UFC as really good athletes tend to lack a certain level of toughness. They haven't really experienced those hard times in the cage, and sometimes it breaks them. I can think of a couple of examples about that. Diakiese is not that. This man has the spirit of a warrior and the physicality of a phenom. And he's got to put some things together before he can really become something to look at. But what he is right now is probably good enough to get the job done against Dan Hooker. Probably good enough to get some takedowns, get some punishing shots on the feet, and take a decision, because Hooker is ultra, ultra tough. So I am going to go with Mark Diakiese here. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Edson Barboza in what is my main event of the night. This is about as close to the pure striker grappler matchup as one can get. Khabib's stand-up is suspect, but he is a takedown machine, outrageous top control game, incredibly strong, freakishly so, very tough. Barboza, very good range striker, does a great job with all those things. Actually not a bad grappler, but definitely doesn't want to be there. His wrestling is not necessarily great, but he does use his footwork to an amazing extent to avoid takedowns. That being said, if we're going to look at this through what we have seen Edson Barboza get taken down and get worked. We have not seen someone stuff Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's why I'm going with Khabib. I am worried about his talk of featherweight, and I hope to God it's a joke. But as much as I think that he should probably be at 170, and that 155 is a stretch, although apparently, according to his nutritionist, things are going very, very well this time. And the fact that he did change some things up after missing weight does give me some hope. I am going to take him here via a third-round submission. I think that if things go like I think they will, with his pressure ability and some takedowns and some top control thrown in, that he will eventually break Barboza. And probably get something like a rear naked choke or an arm triangle or something akin to that. So, Nurmagomedov. But it would not surprise me to see Barboza get on his bike, use some very solid footwork, and an immense striking advantage he has to pick up the win either. But I kind of have to see Nurmagomedov lose before I really believe someone has the answer to his wrestling. And that's kind of where we are. And you don't always have that with an undefeated fighter. I mean, case in point, Mark Diakiese, who we just talked about losing to Drakkar Klose. Well, I picked Diakiese to win that fight. It was still, it was a fight that you could definitely see him losing. And this, I have to see it to believe it, I guess, in the end. The main event of the evening. Chris Cyborg, Holly Holm. I've heard a lot of thoughts about how Holly Holm is going to win this fight. I don't agree with really any of them. She is a high-volume striker, but not one that knows how to lead particularly well, and not one who deals necessarily with extreme pressure very well, unless she knows exactly what you're going to do, i.e. Ronda Rousey. So, as we'll probably always be the case with Cyborg fights. I am going with Cyborg. I think that her pressure counter game, which she does both very effectively actually, is going to be far too much for Holly Holm. I think when Holm does go for her counters, which she does have some, I think she may end up getting countered at times. I don't think she can handle Cyborg's power. I don't think any woman on the planet in that weight class can. We can debate all day about how much of that might be PEDs, might not be PEDs, etc., and that's always going to foreshadow any Cyborg discussion, but realistically speaking, Bethe Correia was able to frustrate Holly Holm for large portions of their fight before getting knocked out. And if you really believe that Cyborg cannot utilize a lot of what Bethe Correia utilized, and a lot more athletically, bigger, stronger, more powerful, more explosive, more athletic, I don't know what to tell you. We could be in for a shock here, but I'm going with Cyborg, and it's probably my most comfortable pick on the card. Should be mentioned, this has got to be the first time I think I've seen a 1 in 3 in her last 4 fights fighter get a title shot. And like in a weird way, I'm actually okay with it, because that's women's featherweight right now. That's how thin it is. So going with Cyborg. It's an interesting night of cards to see off the year. Interesting night of fights, I should say. You've also got the Risen GP going on, so if you're a little bit more into the underground element of MMA, feel free to check that out. And usual links below. And I'll talk to you in the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.